It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the Tool Shed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hey folks, welcome to the Tool Shed podcast. As you may be aware, if you've heard or tuned into any of these podcasts in the past, we are always looking for things that are going to help with the building business, such as philosophies, ideas, tools, platforms, software, all those sorts of things that can help. But one of the key issues that we talk about a little bit, but I don't believe that we talk about it enough because it really does need to be talked about a lot more. We need to understand a lot more is just the whole area of mental health in the building industry. And it was one of those things that until I really started to specialise and work with people in the building industry, I didn't realise how powerful it was, how many instances there were of challenges with mental health throughout the building industry, and it really captured my attention, and I felt that we need to do something about it. And so we're often trying to find people who are experts in this area that can give us some guidance, some direction to be able to contribute to the betterment of mental health throughout the building industry. On this particular episode, we're talking to Sonja Bottern. She's a repeat offender. Sonja, you've been on this podcast before, and you came back, which we're really happy about. I think we need to start, just in case somebody didn't see the original episode, a quick bit of backstory and how you got involved with what you do at this point.
Yes, hi, Mick. Thank you for inviting or for having me back again. It's great to be back here. It does seem like a while ago. How did I get to where I am today? Social worker really probably is what led me into this work. Worked in the mental health space for many years, worked at headspace centres in particular, and more recently moved across to setting up my own business, which is Bottern Consulting, as well as working for Jesuit Social Services Support After Suicide in their Support After Suicide team. Having lost my father 3 years ago to suicide has just made me very passionate about talking and spreading the word about looking after your mental health, and particularly around suicide prevention.
Yeah, and that's what I'd love to talk about today, is any tips, any ideas, any suggestions that are going to help us. And it's like it's affected our business and our lives. It just seems to happen to so many people. I just think everyone you talk to knows somebody that has been affected by suicide. In our particular case, the person that built the home that I'm standing in right now committed suicide just a bit over a year ago, and there just doesn't ever seem to be a conversation that we have, month by month where somebody is affected by this. And something that I wanted to ask you to give us some guidance on, and this happened when you and I were on the phone, and I didn't tell you about this, but we were talking about a member of the yacht club that I'm a commodore of a small regional yacht club, and one of our members committed suicide earlier this year, and I was speaking. Well, I wasn't really even speaking to him the week before it happened. There was a yacht race. He was in the yacht club. He walked past me in the yacht club after the race, and it was like looking through somebody. Like there was nothing in his eyes, and he just sort of said, "G'day, Mick," and walked past. And then a number of days later, we got the news that he'd taken his own life. So I want to talk about the signs and all that sort of stuff in a minute, but when I was speaking to you about this on the phone, and I was driving the car at the time,
Yep.
I started to tear up, and I just started to get quite emotional about that whole thing. And he wasn't really a close friend, but I did know him. He actually took the promotional photos for the Toolshed podcast. You know, he was a professional photographer and a hell of a nice guy. And so the first thing I'd like you to talk about and see if you can give us some guidance on is how we look after ourselves when something like this happens, because it happened. I dealt with it. I needed to have conversations with his father because he rang me and told me about it and wanted the yacht club members to come to a celebration of his life. So we had to organise all of that. And when I spoke to you, it was like it was many weeks later, maybe 8 weeks later, and it just bang, it hit me driving in the car when I was talking to you about it. What do we need to do to look after ourselves when something like that happens in our lives?
And it's a good question. And just before I answer it, I'm going to take it a step back. I can't remember whether we covered this last time. But unfortunately, what we know about a death by suicide is it can be up to 100 people who can be impacted by a suicide. When somebody dies from natural causes, of course, family and friends, colleagues are the ones that are impacted. But what's very different about suicide is it spreads wider than just the immediate family and friends. So what we find is people who have met that person or relate to that person or feel similar to the person who's died by suicide in some way can be impacted. And that's also why when we have well-known people take their own lives, it has such a massive impact on followers and people who hear about it. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that everybody who's impacted then goes on to have thoughts about wanting to take their own lives. But unfortunately, there are some who have perhaps already been thinking about suicide, for whom, when they hear news like this, start having thoughts about taking their own lives. And that's the concern. So when you talk about self-care, of course, you're talking about looking after yourself as well as your mates, whoever's around you. And being aware that there may be people around you for whom the thought, which has been there all along, starts to look like, I wonder whether this is an option for me. I wonder whether I should be thinking about taking my own life as well. You know, after all, I was the same. I did the same. You know, I related to him. He wasn't able to cope. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's the usual self-care things. I think it's about recognizing the fact that it's going to have an impact is the first thing. I don't think it's possible. I hope most people understand this, that you can't expect there won't be any impact at all. So being honest and open about the fact that this is going to have some level of impact. How much impact depends very much about what's already happened to you. If you're already struggling with something in your life where this is then an additional thing on top of that, the amount of support you've perhaps got around you, people that you can talk to. Now, some people might want to talk. Some people don't want to talk. Some people might cry. Some people don't want to cry at all. Some people, so the thing about grief, and it doesn't matter what sort of grief, is everybody grieves differently. And I think that's really important, especially when you're a couple and you might find that your partner grieves one way but it's not the same way as you, and it can lead to lots of problems within relationships as well when people are all dealing with it differently. So what you do with grief, you take it easy on yourself. If you can, think about the things that usually give you some sort of joy or enjoyment and do those things. Lots of people have coping strategies, like they might drink a bit more or whatever. So thinking about, what are my coping strategies when things are tough? What do I do? And thinking about then bringing those things back in again. Some of them are going to be more helpful. Some will be less helpful. You'll be looking out, if you're looking after your mates, people who begin doing things that are not so helpful. Perhaps they're drinking too much, much more than usual, or doing things that you just think, what, this doesn't look like it's good for that person. But on the whole, we've got our own tool belt. I really like your tool shed. We all have a tool belt of coping strategies, and it's about looking at what are those strategies and pulling them out and using them. Maybe I'll go for a walk. Maybe I'll listen to music. Maybe I'll spend time with my children, Maybe it's about the animals, maybe it's about gardening. It's whatever it is. Maybe it's about going in your own tool shed, building something, hammering something. So just being gentle. We say that we expect people during the grieving process to bounce. It's almost like having two walls. And you can have a bounce where you feel really good. And then at another moment, you feel terrible and you might be crying or feeling really angry. And you bounce backwards and forwards. That's part of the grief process. And it's completely normal that you can have a moment or a day where you feel completely fine. Rather than feeling guilty, just acknowledge that's part of the grief process. And then other days where you feel awful. But what we see is a gradual improvement. You do slowly start feeling better, not straight away. It's people who you don't see the signs that they are slowly getting better. I feel like I've more than answered the question. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, you have. It's excellent stuff. I also wanted to get suggestions and guidance about how you feel afterwards. We had a number of us had discussions after this. Our club member took his own life, and each of us said, yeah, he was very different that last time we saw him. And as I said, you look into his eyes and there was nothing there. And you don't really that was obviously a sign, but it wasn't obvious to us that it was a sign until we got the news. And after of that, a couple of us having conversations, and I think that I know I felt guilty and a couple of others felt guilty that we missed that. And was there something that we could have done? If you stand back from it and I look at it now, it was like if I sort of stopped and asked if every single person that didn't look quite right, are you okay? That's all I'd be doing all day.
Yeah.
That I understand that logically, but from an emotional point of view, because this happened, you can't help but feel, did I mess something up? Did I miss an opportunity to say something, to do something that could have prevented this?
Yeah.
What do we have to think? How do we have to deal with that in the aftermath?
Well, unfortunately, as you say, Mick, the biggest emotion that people have when somebody takes their own life is one of guilt and thinking, what were the signs? I must have missed the signs. I wish I'd seen the signs. So exactly the way you say it. One of the ways I like to think about somebody is, if you think about another person, you're not with them 24 hours a day. So a person is a person at work, is a person at home, is a parent, is a child potentially of parents. So we've got a number of different parts to ourselves.
Yep.
And we don't ever see the whole part of any person. So the best you can do is notice what you do happen to see. And what you see may not be enough of a sign for you to necessarily pick something up. You did, but you probably picked it up at an unconscious level. Now I run training, and I know I don't talk about a warning sign necessarily being that emptiness you might see in someone's eyes. Probably, and this is not about going back and feeling guilty. If we talk about signs, one of the biggest ones that I talk about a lot is noticing change. If somebody is just very different from the way they normally are. So having said that, it's other things. It can be the person who uses words like feeling helpless or hopeless a lot. So we know people who've got thoughts of suicide are feeling such an enormous amount of pain. It's really about pain. And they just want that pain to stop. They don't actually want to die, but they want the pain to stop, and they can't think of another way to stop the pain. So with that comes this thing where you can't see a future, you can't look forward to anything, you can't think ahead to anything. So if you're with somebody and you get that sense from their language, from the words they use, or from their, not able to tell you what they're doing next weekend, that would be a sign. Other things are people who are looking more depressed than usual. People often withdraw. They stop doing a lot of the things they used to do. So this man that you spoke about, you would wonder whether he had begun to withdraw from a lot of social activities. And perhaps even then, when you saw him, if he was that closed, maybe he'd already started to withdraw within himself. You feel like you can't socialize, you can't really have conversations with people, you can't have fun the same way that you used to. So I mean, I've got a list of them, and it's certainly the training that I do talks a lot about some of those, but they're probably the bigger ones that I would say you would notice. People also drinking more, as I spoke about before, or some of the things the coping strategies. People who are in that much pain, no coping strategies are working anymore. So you see people trying desperately to manage the pain by maybe smoking more, or trying to exercise more, or beginning to lock themselves away, or just to cope. And they stop working, basically, which is when somebody moves down that trajectory to thinking, well, I've got no other choices here.
Hey, I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt, and I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Toolshed podcast. I've got something super exciting I want to share with you. We've got a place that's got a whole bunch more free resources to help you with your building business. In fact, there's a whole other podcast that gives you specific training that will help you get more free time, more profit, and more enjoyment from your building business. And it's called, funnily enough, the Toolshed. It's free to join, and it's full of other success-focused builders. And I invite you to join us in the Toolshed, where you can ask me questions and get guidance and support from other successful builders. Just click the link in the description to join, and I'll see you in there. I hope you enjoy the rest of this podcast. Yeah. I think also we need to unpack what we can do, but also almost discuss, lines of demarcation. And what I mean by that is that me and most everybody else I know are not trained in any sort of formal way to deal with somebody who's having suicidal thoughts. So, what can I do? What shouldn't I do? And also there's this whole mindset that potentially prevents somebody from getting involved at all if you sort of say, how you going? Are you okay? And you get into a bit of a conversation about it, and the person doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want, you get that pushback, and it's like, how hard do I push before I create a bigger problem? Or, it's just a really difficult position for people who are noticing some change in somebody that they like or associate with, and it kind of prevents them from getting involved. So I'd like your take on kind of what we should do, maybe if there's something that we shouldn't do. I don't know. But it's a real challenge when you're in that situation. I've been in it a few times, and you just don't know what to do, how far to go, whether to do anything at all. It's a real challenge.
It is. And so one of the training that I do is Safe Talk. And I say in Safe Talk, we address some of those key things. So number one, people don't know what signs to look out for. And so we've spoken a little bit about those signs. So how do I know if somebody's not traveling well? And I think in your gut, you often do know that.
Yeah.
So we cover what are the signs. Number two, we then talk about how do you ask the question, because people are worried. If I ask somebody about their mental health, or if I especially ask them if they've got thoughts of suicide, I might put the idea in their heads, and I'm really, really worried I'm going to make things worse. So what we know is you absolutely cannot put the idea of suicide in anybody's head. People with thoughts, if you talk to somebody and ask them if they've got thoughts of suicide, they will say yes if they've already got those thoughts. If they've not been thinking about it at all, you're not going to make them suddenly think, oh, you know what? I might just think about killing myself today. It just doesn't work like that.
Yes.
So we advocate very strongly about asking that question, and asking it very directly of somebody. So are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you having thoughts of suicide? And I'm happy to talk later about, how do you have a conversation? I think we spoke about that last time. The third issue people worry about is, what if that person actually says yes? Then I'm stuck with, what do I do now? Now I feel like I'm holding somebody's life somehow.
Yeah.
Now, equally, you might get somebody saying no, but let's assume they say yes. What we know is the biggest thing you can do for somebody is to talk to them, to have a conversation. So there was a guy called Don Ritchie. He was known as Angel of the Gap. And he moved to the Gap, which is unfortunately a popular jump-off spot for people with thoughts of suicide. And while he was there, he noticed people pacing up and down. And he took it upon himself to go and find out what was going on, and discovered people were thinking about jumping off. He was credited in his retirement years, officially by the federal government, he's credited with saving up to 180 people's lives.
Wow. Amazing.
His family felt like it was more like 500. All he did was have conversations, chat to them, invite them in for a cup of coffee, ask them what's going on. So it's that space of listening to somebody and hearing what's going on in their lives at this point in time. So that's the next step sort of covered, if you like. And then the last step is, who do I then pass them on to? What do I say to them about where to get help? So we know the GP is a good place to go. Can I say a good GP? There are lots of GPs who are too busy. So if you can find somebody who's able to spend the time going to them and letting them know that you've got these thoughts of wanting to end your life, and getting a mental health treatment plan. That treatment plan just allows you to go and talk to somebody, a counselor. And I say all the time, mental health first aid is the same as physical first aid. So if you break your arm, or you've got diabetes, or you've got some other health issues, you go to a GP, or you should, most people do. Why is it any different with mental health? So if you think about the two as being similar, then going to talk to somebody, going to talk to your GP about your physical health is no different from going to your GP and saying, well, actually, I'm struggling with my mental health at this point in time. But I want to go back to one thing you said. What if somebody says no? What we know is, if somebody is thinking about suicide, if you are in the space of genuinely wanting to know if they've got thoughts of suicide, usually they will let you know. It's a case of you, as the person asking the question, needing to feel comfortable. So if I ask you if you're having thoughts of suicide, but I'm giving you this look of, don't tell me, please don't tell me, because I don't know what you're going to say to me and I don't know what to do, you're not likely to tell me that you're having thoughts of suicide. So I have to set up a space where I genuinely am saying to myself, you know what, I really want to know what Nick's thinking about. So I'm going to ask him that question. At the end of the day, if the person won't tell you, there isn't a whole lot you can do.
No.
If you know his partner or you know friends, you might see if there's somebody else who could perhaps have that conversation with the person that you're concerned about. So, yeah. Does that...
Yeah. You use the term mental health first aid, and you were sort of talking about it, at least the way I interpreted it, was self-help, and going to see the GP or what have you. Is there anything that I can do as the person that comes upon somebody and has that conversation, and is there such a thing as first aid that I apply? And is there like the same sort of thing that you have the ABC for a physical first aid? Is there some sort of acronym to help us remember the sequence of what we might need to do?
There are acronyms, absolutely, and that's in the training that I run. But I actually prefer to say, if you think about the guy Don Ritchie, then the most important thing is caring enough about somebody to say, I'm noticing this stuff's going on. I've noticed you've been a bit withdrawn. I've noticed, you're not coming to the pub as often as you used to, or we're not playing, we're not doing the things. Sorry, I'm not a tradie, so I'm probably using all the wrong language, but, we're not doing the things we used to. So I want to acknowledge that I've noticed this stuff about you, and so I'm a bit worried about you.
Yeah.
Now, that is the same as if you saw your mate coming down the road and his arm was dangling and clearly broken. You wouldn't go, oh, hi, I see you've broken your arm. Let's go and
play some footy.
Go out. You would play some footy. You would be saying, hey, how come you're not seeing the doctor?
Yeah.
I've noticed your arm is dangling. Why don't we go see the doctor? Why haven't you been to see the doctor? I've noticed that you've stopped coming to things. I've noticed that you've been quite down lately. I've noticed that, we used to get together, once a week, or you don't come to work all the time, or I notice your clothes are looking a bit all over the place. Whatever it is, I want to just check what's going on, what's
Yeah.
happening for you. So that genuine inquiry is part of the first aid. And the second part of it is then listening and being willing to hear whatever it is. The third part of it is being willing to, perhaps, if possible, yourself be able to say, if it's true, look, I get what you're going through. I've had this before. Or, so in some way, empathizing, if you like, we use the word empathizing, but being vulnerable, if you like, but being able to share when you have felt similarly can be really helpful for the other person who might be feeling like there's nobody else who's feeling the exact same way.
Mm.
And then, in the midst of all that there, you want to do that check-in with that suicide question. You don't have to do it straight away, but you can do it straight away. You might chat through, do a bit of listening, hear what's happening. You might say that his relationships, he's having problems with his partner or his kids, and so hearing that, sometimes that's all a person needs, is to just be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
That's enough.
So if we unpack the whole listening thing, because it's something that we do in Black Belt with our builders, believe it or not, is teach them what we call level 5 listening skills, which is empathic listening. And,
Yes.
one of the first things that I learned was the difference between sympathy and empathy. And, empathy in my mind is understanding how you feel but not feeling like that. Sympathy is understanding how you feel and feeling the same.
Yes.
And so empathy gives you the better opportunity to be of use to that other person. And I just wonder that because most of us just aren't given the skills or taught even the understanding of what empathy is and what empathic listening looks like, my suspicion is what people tend to do is try and fix the problem. So, I understand what the problem is, and I want to bombard you with solutions. And in my mind, and I could be wrong, that's probably not the best way to support somebody who's having suicidal thoughts, is giving them solutions versus just understanding from their perspective without judgment, without agreeing, without disagreeing, without advice. Am I on the right track?
Oh, you're 100% on the right track. So what you said is what I would say. People with thoughts of suicide usually more than anything else, desperately just need somebody to hear them. They need to feel like they're not the only ones feeling like this. And they need to feel that there may be some hope. And the most common response when somebody asks another person if they're having thoughts of suicide, the most common response is that person feels relief. It's like, here for the first time is somebody that I can talk to about it, somebody who's noticed that I'm really struggling and is okay with me sharing. So you need to make that an okay space to do that. And then while you're listening, you're right, we all want to go in there and just fix it. But it's not about that. It's actually sitting with somebody else's pain. And that can be really tricky because we want to say, hey, but I know that, you could just do this. And I know your kids are great. And your wife or your husband, I mean, they talk about you all the time. So they obviously care about, that's what we want to do. But actually the person doesn't want you to do that. They just want you to hear their pain as it is for them there and then. So that is so key. That's what you're saying. That's so key to this listening.
Yeah. It's quite a challenge because everything that we've talked about today isn't anything that we are taught at any stage unless we go out and purposefully seek the understanding and the training and the tools to be able to help in this space. So having said that, where do people reach out to you if there's businesses out there that want your skills and your training in their business to be able to do something about that in their business? What's the best place to go? How does it happen?
I've got a business called Bottern Consulting, and I'm happy to run suicide prevention, training. It's called Assist Training, and it goes over 2 days. It's probably not something that most people would be interested in attending. But what may be of more interest is one that's called Safe Talk. So earlier I spoke about the idea of knowing what the signs are, being comfortable with asking the question, and then knowing what to do if somebody says yes, those kind of steps. So Safe Talk is something that I am happy to run. I tend to run it for organizations rather than just putting on a public course.
Yes.
So if you think it's something you'd like to do, I would then meet with your organization or the organization and get a sense of who's working there, what is the industry, what are the issues that have come up, what is important. So I can try and tailor my training to sort of make sense for the business that's there. I also run mental health first aid, and that is just enabling people to get an idea about what are the most common mental health problems that adults may have. I run one for youth and I run one for older persons, but the one that's probably the most useful is the standard one. So if you contact me, I think, if we put that out there, I've got a phone number, I've got an email address, happy for people to contact me, and I'm happy to chat about it further without any commitment. I just wanted to go back, Mick. I do believe strongly there is training that can make us feel more comfortable about doing this. But I don't think it's necessarily always about the training. It's about being okay with having conversations with people, because I think we often feel like it's personal. I don't want to step over any boundaries.
Yes.
It's their business. But can I say, there's a lot of things that we used to think were like that. So, for instance, family violence, we used to say, that's up to the family to sort out. We don't interfere. Now we take a different stance on that, and we go, you know what, family violence is not okay. Children who are sexually abused, again, we would say, oh, that's kind of hush-hush, that's that with the family. And now we don't do that. And this is the same thing with suicide. It needs to be something that we're all okay about talking about. It is, and especially when you think about the fact that the person with the thoughts actually wants help. And I think that's what's really important. You feel like you're invading their privacy, but actually they are calling out for help. By putting out all these signs, they're actually saying, please help me.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant advice. We will make sure that the contact information is in the description of this episode of the podcast, so anyone wanting to reach out and have a conversation with you can do it effortlessly. But I just wanted to thank you for being on the podcast and talking about this with us. It's just such an important topic. It's an uncomfortable topic, but as you said, to make progress as a society, we need to start to have more conversations with this. And there's been a lot of benefits because we've been having conversations about these difficult areas, just as you've mentioned about, family violence and sexual assault and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
We've got to talk about it. We've got to understand it. We've got to come together and agree that it isn't okay and step into that discomfort. Otherwise, nothing will change. So thank you so much for being a repeat offender.
And Mick, just before I go, just if anybody's having thoughts or if this has, caused any distress, just reminding people about there's Men's Line Australia, Lifeline, Beyond Blue. You probably put that on, but I just wanted to say this could cause some, as you say, discomfort. Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. We'll put a few of those links in the description as well, so that people have got resources to reach out to people like those and TX and a few others. So it's great stuff. Thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Mick. See you.
So, folks, I hope that got you thinking. Yes, it is uncomfortable, but it is around us all, and we just need to step into that discomfort. And I think there was just some really fantastic, solid advice in this episode, so you can, I guess, step into that and do something about it. I know that, in my particular situation, I've learned a lot from this conversation, and I feel significantly better armed with the tool belt, as Sonja mentioned, to be able to step into some of these conversations And I don't think it's a bad thing if you step into a conversation and it was unnecessary. You're probably better off stepping into a conversation like that and finding out that it was unnecessary rather than experience what we experienced a little while ago. Didn't step into the conversation and it was necessary. So I'd rather be safe than sorry. So please reach out if you feel that it's appropriate for your business. We will put a bunch of links in the description for resources. If you are feeling depressed or feel that you need to speak to somebody, we're going to put some links in the description for you to click on and get some frictionless access to those discussions. So that is all for this episode of the Tool Shed podcast. I'm Mick Horse from Builders Business Black Belt. That is all. I am out. Bye for now.
You've been listening to The Tool Shed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.